there my fellow Indians, welcome to News Hamster. Wishing you all a very happy Independence Day and hoping and praying that our nation reaches great heights of progress and development. Well, in today's video we shall talk about 7 important things that you did not know about Indian history. And here I am not particularly referring to Indian freedom struggle, but I am talking about history in general. And yes, this episode of News Hamster is brought to you by miljayega.com. We all know that Chandragupta Maurya was the founder of the prolific Mauryan Empire. But little did we know that Chandragupta Maurya converted to Jainism in his last days. Yes, according to Digambar Jaina texts, a Jaina monk named Bhadrabahu predicted a 12-year-long famine in the region, which was going to occur because of all the bloodshed and the military conquest that Chandragupta Maurya had caused. As a result, a group of monks moved from North India to South India and settled in present-day Shravanbelagola in Karnataka. One among them was Chandragupta Maurya, who converted to Jainism, abdicated the throne in the name of his son Bindusara and became a Jaina monk forever. With Bhadrabahu and his gang, he came down to South India, settled and spent his last days practicing Sallekkhana, which is a practice in Jainism which means fasting unto death, and he spent his last days and died here in Shravanbelagola. Whenever you talk about Indian history, you'll hear the fact that India is a nation which has not attacked any other nation throughout the course of its history. But is it exactly true? Not exactly, because if you go 5,000 years ago, you will learn about the Chola kingdom of South India. Now, when you talk about this kingdom had a huge navy and had conquered several regions in the Southeast Asian nations like Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Malaysia, so on and so forth. Together, these nations were collectively referred to as Suvarna Bhumi by the Chola kingdom. As a result of this, we see Hindu influence and Hindu temples in these regions. While some population traces its origin to Tamil Nadu in India, some Chola records have been unearthed in the regions, and most importantly, the Angkor Wat, which is now a Buddhist temple, was initially a Hindu temple dedicated to Lord Vishnu. We have firmly acknowledged the fact that Muslims or Mughals in general were the first foreign invaders to come to India. But is it really true? If we look at it that way, the first Muslim invader, Muhammad bin Qasim, came to India in 712 AD. But before him, way before him, came Alexander the Great in 326 BC, which makes him the first foreign invader to invade India. After his invasion, he defeated the king, Porus, and established his embassies in northwest part of India. As a result, we have mention of trade relations with Greeks in many of the historical records. We also see Greek inscriptions being unearthed in those parts of the region. And of course, we see the influence of the Greco-Roman art on the Gandhara school of sculpture in India. When we talk about medieval India, we find a mention of a queen, Razia Sultana, who happens to be the daughter of the famous Ilbari Turk or the ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. His name was Iltutmish, or however you want to call him as Iltamish or Iltumush or however. But what's notable about Razia Sultana is how she held the position of an empress in a male-driven patriarchal Muslim setup like the Delhi Sultanate. Of course, her course was of just 4 years, but the predicaments she faced were immense. When her father died, who had nominated her as his successor, her half-brother or step-brother, Rukhnuddin Firoz, usurped the throne, and her stepmother planned to get her executed. But Razia instigated a whole rebellion against the two, got them disposed, and ascended the throne. Even after she got to the throne, her life wasn't very easy. She was expected by the nobles and the ministers in her darbar to remain a puppet in their hands, as she was a woman. But she continuously asserted herself, and as a result, she got deposed and killed at the end of her regime. We all know that Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was a reformist, a man who wanted to reform Islam and Muslims with modern interpretations of Quran and Hadith. But do we know that Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was someone who pledged his loyalties to the British Empire? Yes, during the 1857 Great Revolt, he said we have to pledge our loyalties to the British Empire, meaning he did not support the mutineers or the sepoys. Later, he was also seen criticizing the Indian National Congress for their activities against the British government. He also asked the Muslims of that time to pledge their allegiance to the British government. Though he was the founder of the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, which is now called as the Aligarh Muslim University, he mooted for Urdu to be adopted as a lingua franca for all Muslims. Does this make him a bad man? Talk to me in the comment section and we shall discuss. Vinayak Damodar Savarkar or Veer Savarkar has often been criticized for writing a maafi or a mercy petition to the British Empire seeking his release. But is he the only freedom fighter to have written a mercy petition? Just think about it. A lot of freedom fighters did write mercy petitions to the British. Some of them were accepted, some of them did. A prime example I can give you is of Ram Prasad Bismil, who wrote an apology to the British seeking his release, but his apology was not accepted. If this dilutes their tag as freedom fighters, what do we have to say about all those moderate set of freedom fighters ranging from Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Umesh Chandra Banerjee, Dadabhai Naoroji or Surendranath Banerjee, who were willing to work within the ambit of British government to achieve freedom? Meaning to say, they were willing to work with the British and within the British to be called as freedom or independent. Did we know about this? We all know that the British ruled us and oppressed us for a span of 200 years. And whatever changes they bought it in their self-interest. This brings me to my next point, where I mentioned to you about Lord William Bentinck. Yes, Lord William Bentinck served as a Governor General of India, and he brought several changes that reformed Indian societal makeup. Most importantly, he brought the change of the abolition of Sati Act 1829, which put an end to this humiliating and this inhuman practice of Sati. Yes, Raja Ram Mohan Roy did help him in this, but then Lord William Bentinck takes the credit of abolishing Sati in India. We can also talk about how he put an end to Thuggy, which was a very bad practice of looting innocent Indians at that point in time. And also he put an end to human trafficking, that is sacrifice of humans that was taking place at that point, and he also put an end to female infanticide that was widely practiced in India. Yes, he attracted the wrath of the native Indians, but whatever he did it in the larger interest of Indians. Yes, my fellow Indians, Indian history is huge, Indian history is vast. But what we do while reading history, what we do wrong while reading history, is we judge it and we color it. And we try to remold it and represent it to our future generations in the way we want it. And that's something very wrong that we do with such beautiful culture and such beautiful heritage that we have experienced. History is invaluable. History is a part of our heritage. We should let it be however it is and not try to have its ramifications in the present time. Well, that's it from my side. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you're new here, press the subscribe button and hit the like button if you've liked the video, and share this video with as many people as possible. And keep following News Hamster for more news and updates. Log on to www.thenewshamster.com. Until next time, Jai Hind, wishing you a very, very happy Independence Day.